this recording the session. I'm going to provide a live transcript. Stick. Okay. So we're just going to jump right on in, and I will say about halfway through, so roughly towards 11:30, we will have some alumni of the MSW-MPP and current MPP MSW students joining us, so they can kind of field some of your questions as far as what it's like to be an actual student in the dual degree program, and you know, where it can essentially lead you as a student that has completed the dual degree program. So let's see. Claire, we would have to kind of discuss this a little bit separately. We just don't have time to go into MSW-MPP versus MSW-MPH. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. To jump right on into the presentation. So thank you all for joining. This is the dual degree exploration MPP MSW information session. Obviously what we're going to talk about is MPP MSW dual degree. For starters, I do want to say that individually each degree is a 2-year full-time in-person program. Combined, it is going to be 3 years. So what I'm going to do is talk about the different areas of concentration for each degree. We're going to go over the application requirements, and you'll see what the overlap is between those two. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the funding before we have our current and alumni students join in on the information session. You guys can definitely question them, hopefully enthusiastically. Okay, so just to jump in. The MSW. So the MSW has areas of concentration, which are fairly fleshed out. The MSW program is a little bit more rigid than the MPP program, in that these are really the 3 areas that they have as far as like what you can concentrate in. And then I'll show you a little bit more as far as what's possible for the MPP program. But they have child and family well-being, health and mental health access across the lifespan, and social and economic justice. I failed to mention that my counterpart, Oliver Ike, who oversees the MSW program, will not be able to join us today. However, his contact information will be provided at the end, and he definitely encourages all of you to reach out. Okay, so that stuff being out of the way. Again, this MSW is a little bit more rigid. So the way that this typically will work is with your elective courses, you won't have quite as much flexibility because you essentially have to apply to 2 different programs and meet 2 different programs' degree requirements. Okay, so this is what you're looking at here. And I will go into the MPP areas of concentration. So again, we have a larger number. What I typically say is that you can kind of blend more than one concentration with one another. However, again, being a dual degree student, you have just a little bit less flexibility. So, you know, you may be able to touch on some of these concentrations, but I would say as a dual degree student, you would most likely focus on trauma, resilience, and human rights policy. Okay. So yes, you could most likely dabble and take courses from different areas of concentration through policy, but that last one is going to be really where your primary focus is going to be. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so again, jumping into the admissions criteria, for the MSW, you need 1 official copy of your transcripts. This is a little bit different than MPP, and I'll show you why. You need a TOEFL or an IELTS score, and this is only for international students. You do need a statement of purpose that's somewhat tailored to the MSW, and I'll talk about how to address it if you intend to apply to both programs initially. You need 3 letters of recommendation, 2 academic, 1 professional. If you have been out of school for more than 5 years at a time, it's okay if all of your references are from professional. A resume. MSW really likes you to specify the months and year in each position. A personal statement, And then you would want to upload all of your documents onto the graduate division application online. I would say the benefit of applying to the dual degree is that the MSW-MPP share the same application. So I don't believe you would have to pay essentially twice. And if you have a fee waiver for an application, or if you were a part of a pipeline program, then you can waive the application for applying to both programs. Okay. So getting into the admissions criteria for the MPP. So we really only require, what's it called? So your transcripts, okay. We really only require unofficial transcripts as far as your submission. On the MPP side, as long as we can see your name and the name of your institution, then you know, that's sufficient for us, especially if you're still working to complete your degree. However, as you saw on the previous slide, MSW is looking for your official documents. So if you plan to apply to both programs at the same time, you want to go with the requirements of the most stringent program, because you will most likely meet the requirements of the one that's more flexible by default, if that makes any sense. Okay. And the way that I'm stressing, you know, if you intend to apply to both programs initially, it gives you kind of an opportunity to be considered twice. So if you apply to the MPP MSW this fall, and you're admitted into the MSW and not the MPP, or vice versa, you have another opportunity to apply to that program by the end of your first year. So there's kind of like a benefit if you decide to apply to both at once, and for whatever reason aren't admitted to both, then you can definitely reapply to the one you weren't admitted to before the end of your first year. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anybody have any questions about that?
I do.
Yes.
This is a question regarding transcripts. So, um, does unofficial, I'm sorry, do all official transcripts reflect in progress courses or not really? I'm not
They
sure.
typically will. They typically will. So as long as you've registered for that quarter and you have those classes on your class list, then it'll show. The grade won't be there. It'll show that you are in progress, but you know, we'll still see that you have those courses coming up as far as like grades to submit.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else have any questions?
Percy, I have one question. Can
Yes,
you hear
hi,
me?
Sagar.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to know, do we need like GRE? It's like an optional, right? For international student, is it like mandatory
Okay,
for
so that's a really good question.
in any case?
For the MSW, there is no GRE requirement. It's not even optional. They're not looking for it. They're not accepting it. They don't want you to submit it. For the MPP, it's optional if you're a domestic student. It's recommended as a domestic student if you don't have any quantitative background, you don't have time to take, you know, 1 or 2 courses in between as far as statistics or microeconomics is concerned, then it's recommended that you sit for the GRE, but it would still be considered optional if you're a domestic student or a domestic applicant. If you're an international applicant and you completed your undergraduate study outside of the United States or outside of a country that speaks English, so like the UK, I believe Australia is also considered an exception, then it's still optional. However, if you completed your undergraduate degree in a country or institution that is not primarily 100% English speaking, then you are required to submit that GRE. I know that might be a little confusing, especially for international students. So if you need a clarification about that or want to know if your education specifically would be waived out of that GRE requirement, definitely reach out to me. I can look it up and let you know pretty quickly. Claire, another question?
Thank you for that. I mean, that's it for now.
Of course. Claire, will we need an economics course prior to matriculation or statistics? Okay. Statistics is fine. Again, it kind of just depends on what your quantitative background is. You know, if you have taken a course and it was maybe 10 years ago, you might want to take another course, you know. This is really to prepare you for the rigor of what the MPP program offers. We are very quantitative heavy, more so than the MSW. So we always advise our students to take maybe 1 or 2 courses in preparation. If you don't have that background, you don't have time to take the course. We know the GRE is very expensive, but maybe you have sat in on, or you've taken some online preparation courses, like something through Coursera or Lynda. While they won't carry the same weight as if you took an accredited course from a JC or community college, it does show us at least that you've done some type of preparation. So my advice in general is to always include what you've done, to speak on it or draw attention to it if you need to, just to kind of put it on our radar. You know, maybe it doesn't 100% fit what we're looking for in that particular aspect of the application, but the rest of your application is very strong. Your letters of recommendation are very powerful. Your statements are, you know, compelling. Then it can definitely push you into that admission pile. Khalil?
Yeah, is the quantitative experience something that we should elaborate on in a personal statement, or would it be okay just in like a resume or transcripts if it shows those classes or that work experience?
Yeah, if this shows in your transcripts, you definitely don't have to draw additional attention to it. I would say that's something that you may want to address if you don't have that type of a background. So if it's like, you know, you've taken a course and maybe you got a B or a C in it, and that was the only course that you've taken, but you know that you could, maybe you had a difficult time in your undergraduate education, or maybe you have taken other again, like online, maybe not accredited things, but things to kind of prepare you better, then you would really want to draw attention to that to let the committee know that you are willing to do the work or go the extra mile to prepare for the program. But if you already have that, if it's already showing in your transcripts, then you should be fine. I feel like I said a lot. Are there any questions about what I just said? Okay, great. So moving forward, we're going to talk about some of the fellowships that social welfare offers. The overlap between social welfare and MPP is the GOFP, which is the Graduate Opportunity Fellowship Program. It comes with tuition fee remission at the in-state level. It also comes with a $20,000 stipend. So it's roughly $37,000 in total. It doesn't go towards your PDST fees. Social welfare has a slightly different approach as far as it comes to funding, but the GOFP is relatively the same. So what we do as far as dual degree applicants are concerned is our departments will typically kind of talk over who we're nominating for the GOFP. So if you're nominated by MSW, you wouldn't be nominated by MPP because you can only receive one award. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to assume that makes sense. All right. MSW also offers department fellowship. It's need-based, and you can apply for it in the winter of your first quarter to expect to receive it roughly in the spring. My understanding is that those fellowships can truly range. They go from anywhere between, I would say, roughly $500 to $2,000. MSW is a little bit different in that not only does this department support master students, but it also supports PhD. So their funding is structured differently than the MPP program because we only support master students. Okay. MSW also has different fellowships as far as what's available through the state of California. So the California Social Work Education Center offers a 2-year stipend. It's $18,500 for each year that you're with MSW. The way the MSW-MPP schedule works is that you would have 1 year in one program, your second year would be the other program, and your third year would be a 50-50 split. So the year that you're with MSW, you would be able to receive that $18,500. Your 50-50 year split would be where the rest of that funding would be applied to. The way that this program works is you would have to commit to working 2 years after earning your MSW degree in order to essentially, like, you would still receive wages for the time that you're working, but those 2 years of service are essentially why you're being compensated that $18,500. Does that make sense? Okay, and so you would be placed typically within Riverside, San Bernardino, Ventura County, LA County, or other DCFS employees are eligible for this program, but specifically for MSW students, this is kind of like a source of funding. So you would essentially accept funding, agree to work 2 years afterwards, and then you would complete your 2-year work requirement so that you don't have to pay that funding back that you received already while still earning your wages. And I have a question. I believe these fellowships are available for international students as well, Sagar. Yes. I think they're just tied to the actual degree itself. Okay. The LADCFS is more of a county level opportunity, and they also offer a work fellowship compensation program. So the difference here is that you would only receive 1 year and it would be in your second year. So, you know, if you don't apply for the state version, the CalSWEC, then you can do the LADCFS, and you would only have to essentially pay back that 1 year of labor post-graduation, post-completion. So those are just kind of like the terms for these types of funding opportunities. Outside of this, there is a very specific fellowship, which is the Southern California Geriatric Social Work Education Consortium. This comes with a 1-year stipend. It's only between $4,000 to $6,000, but you don't have to agree to work post-completion in order to receive that fellowship. So you just would have to be working in the field of gerontological studies as it falls under social welfare. Okay. Now, MPP is a little bit different. I'm sorry, before I get into that, remember this is a 2-year full-time program, unless you're doing the dual degree, in which case it's 3 years. The classes are Tuesdays and Thursdays, and this is the same as as MPP, which is kind of why we have that breakup as far as 1 year with one program and your second year with the other one, because otherwise there'd just be like a lot of overlap. There are internships and field placements required. They typically fall on Monday and Wednesday. They're 8 hours, and Fridays in your second year, 4 hours. All modules are required for your field education completion. So if you have questions as far as what those modules are and how to go about completing those, I would definitely have to redirect you to Oliver, because he has just far more insight as far as what's available, the flexibility, and the type of placement that happens for the social welfare side of things. Okay. Now I'll go into public policy fellowships. Again, the overlap is at GOFP. You can only be nominated for one department because you will not receive 2. It's only as an incoming student. It only applies to that first year. So if you're not nominated for MSW, then you would not be nominated for MPP. Again, it's typically for students from historically underrepresented backgrounds. US citizens or undocumented DACA students can apply. You would receive that first year in-state tuition. It covers the other little fees that come with being a student at UCLA, and you receive the $20,000 living stipend. So again, it's the same. It's roughly $37,000. It does not apply to that PDST fee, but we have a different way of combating that, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. So for the Luskin MPP fellowship packages, for the time that you would be with Luskin for that first year and that 50-50 split, you would be eligible to receive some of this funding. The first year funding ranges from roughly, I would say, $2,500 to $15,000. Top students will receive academic apprentice positions, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And that can be for 1 or 2 quarters. As a dual degree student, those academic apprentice positions would take place in your 3rd year. If you are given another offer from a different program, if it is a dual degree, if it's comparable, you can use it as leverage. If it's not comparable, it doesn't give you quite the same amount of leverage. And then most funding is covered. Your PDST fees are typically outside of the coverage that funding will apply to. However, we do something called PDST grant or a scholarship. This is based off of your FAFSA or your GMAC application. So you can receive something like, I believe the minimum is roughly $600 to $6,000 as far as offsetting the PDST fees for MPP. So for that year that you're with MPP, you would be able to offset the cost of your PDST fees. MSW, I don't believe has that same support or capability. Okay. So teaching assistants. For anyone that has been to a fellowship and funding talk with me, I'm sure this graph is very familiar. For anyone that hasn't, this is kind of the breakdown as far as funding you receive if you become a TA. So again, this kind of applies to literally any graduate student on campus. If you're a TA and you're working 25% time, which is roughly 10 hours a week, as long as you're a full-time student and you have maintained a 3.0 GPA, then you are eligible for a tuition fee remission at the state level. So that 11,442, which is the tuition for MPP specifically for that year, would be waived essentially for every quarter that you are working as a TA. You could, my understanding is that you would still be able to do this as an MSW student. So being in the dual degree doesn't negate the ability to be a TA or to secure academic apprentice positions. Really, it's going to be like your time management. Again, because the rigor of having both programs leaves you just with like a little bit less flexibility. So I'll show you like a sample schedule of what an MPP MSW curriculum looks like once I get to the end of this presentation. We have a few more minutes before our alums join us as well. So, okay. This is essentially what you receive. You have your health insurance is covered, your tuition fee remission is covered, your student services fees and campus fees are covered. What you're seeing at the bottom where it says fall 2020, 5392, that's what you would be responsible for. So that's essentially the power of an academic apprentice position, is it significantly offsets the cost of the your tuition for the program. What it doesn't touch is that PDST fee, the professional degree supplemental tuition fees, which are roughly 10,000 or so. And again, but the stipend. So if you working as a TA, you would receive these benefits in addition to a stipend as payment, and you can use that stipend towards your remaining balance or fees. Okay, the same can be said for the GSR. The benefit of a GSR is that if you're an out-of-state student or an international student, as long as you're working 45% time, which is roughly 18 hours a week, you would receive your in-state tuition, your campus, your health, your university fees, and your non-residential supplemental tuition fees would be covered. So what you would be responsible for is roughly that 153.92, as well as the PDST fees. Those just kind of like don't go away, but you do still receive that stipend. Okay. So this is the decision timeline for the MPP. Our deadline is January 6th. The deadline for the MSW, I believe, is December 1st. So you would certainly want to meet that deadline. Again, the program that has the most stringent requirements are the requirements that you want to aim for, because by default, you will meet our requirements as well. Okay, so this is Oliver's information. You can take a screenshot. I will send this PowerPoint out afterwards, and we will also have the recording made available. And this is my contact information. Okie dokie. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Again, I know I said quite a bit. And before I turn it over to our students. Oh, I do have a question in the chat. What percentage of students who receive fellowships or some sort of financial aid? I want to say this year for the MPP, we were able to award students direct fellowship or funding in some capacity at least 50%. So 55% of our student body were able to receive funding in some way. And this does not include the GOFP nominees or those that received fellowship offers from research centers. So we do our best to give back as much as we can, because it doesn't benefit us to keep the money if our students are struggling. I can't really speak to MSW's funding structure. Again, they're a little bit different because they also support PhDs. So their funding is just, it's structured differently than the MPP funding. But if you have questions as far as how many students receive support from the MSW side, then definitely reach out to Oliver. And so what I'm going to do really quickly is open a sample schedule for y'all. So can everyone see this? Let's go all the way down. It's actually way too big. Okay, here we go. So this is a sample schedule of an MSW-MPP joint degree student.
I can't see anything.
Oh, shoot. Okay, 1 second. Let me try this one more time. There we go. I get very screen specific. Okay, everyone should be able to see this. Okay, it looks busy, right? This student started out with social welfare. It looks like, well, it looks like they've done, I see. Okay. So this is year one, they started out with social welfare. Their year two, they went into public policy, and their year three was something of a 50-50 split between the two. And that's essentially what you can expect to experience as a dual degree student. But instead of me, I can again share this with everyone afterwards, so you can have a copy of what a schedule can potentially look like. But for now, I see that we have Haley and Merhari joining us. Hello, hello. Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. So Haley and Merhari are MSW-MPP from Luskin, and I am going to actually ask them to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about where they are currently and what made them go down this path. So Haley, please, you have the floor.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Broder. I graduated with Merhowie last June, like a couple months ago, and with an MSW and MPP. Happy to answer any questions about that process. My focus was on international work, international humanitarian aid work mostly. And I had a global public affairs focus at Luskin. And Christy, what else should I share?
Oh, we'll come back, but that's great. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay.
Hey everyone, hi Christy, hi Haley. My name is Merhawi Tesfai. I just graduated this past spring with Haley. I am continuing on at Luskin with the social welfare PhD. And I came in with a child and family concentration focus, and then I switched to the health and mental health concentration. So I had a few different areas that I was interested in, but I would say for the most part now it's looking at sort of educational policy for youth and adolescents especially, and continuing on through higher education. So I'll just leave it there, and I guess we can get into more questions and whatever else.
Thank you so much, Merhawi. And Aisha, you joined right on time. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and talking about, I would say, what you're currently doing as far as being an MPP MSW.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aisha, they, them, she, her pronouns. I'm about to start my third year of the dual degree. So, I mean, I've been focusing on community development. The first 2 years, yeah, I mean, you start with something and you end up, completely what you didn't think. But yeah, no, it's been fun. I think in this third year, I'm now venturing into urban planning classes. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. So my first question, and I feel like I get this a lot, especially as a recruiter, it's somewhat difficult for me to answer. But why did you decide to do the MSW-MPP? What made you decide to go for both degrees instead of one or the other? Haley, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
So I came in focused on policy and left really focused on social work. So kind of switched, which was not what I had thought would be the case. But I applied to a few different schools that were focused on both, because I thought that as someone who had worked for many years before coming back to grad school and had worked in the international field in refugee camps, I felt like doing that clinical focus work was not going to be what the policy school was. And being able to have that background and understanding from the social work school gave me the combination that I was looking for. And so social work school gave me the clinical tools, public policy school gave me the overall schools, combining them gave me the holistic approach that I was looking for in a program and in my career moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mayor Howie?
Well, yeah, I think Haley put it great. Like, it was the combined focus of the two programs that I was interested in. I knew I wanted to, I think when I started thinking about grad school, I was like, I'm going to do psychology. Then later on, I thought about social work and being able to do a lot of more of what I was interested in social work versus psychology. And then I always knew I was interested in sort of more macro level issues, politics, the nonprofit sector. And when I started considering the public policy program, I was like, okay, this might be a good fit in giving me experience and training in these issues that I'm interested in, right? So having a little bit of more focus. And I felt like I didn't come in with a lot of, I did some internships and things like that, but I didn't have a lot of experience, I felt like, especially in the clinical area. So I felt like the MSW will give me some of that. So I think that was the main reason. And also I feel like when I'm out there in my career, I want to do a few different things. I don't want to focus solely on clinical work. And I don't want to focus solely on policy level work, right? I want to be able to have a couple different things that I can do. And I got the chance to see professors and other students who were able to wear multiple hats at the same time in their careers. And so that appealed to me as well.
Aisha?
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely echoing all of that. And yeah, I think for me it was, yeah, similarly, I knew I wanted to focus in policy, but recognizing that the way policies come down, of course, at the individual level, and like having that perspective and having that, like it was said, the clinical of problem solving one-on-one. And so I knew even just trajectory wise that I knew if I wanted to become in policy, it would be important for me to have the experience of working with the individual and with groups. And so same way that I wanted to pursue many different interests, like having that flexibility and like that holistic view of how policy comes down and affects the individual, and then how then individuals influence policy. And so like even facilitating those pipelines, I think was really important for me. Now at where I'm working in like developing popular education models and like, you know, working with folks who are organizing. I wouldn't say I'm an organizer myself, but like, you know, even facilitating that pipeline of folks being involved in the policymaking process and facilitating that.
Awesome. And I'm going to just put this question to everyone. Can you talk about the application process itself? Did you apply to both programs initially, or did you apply to one program and then the other later? And do you have any tips for prospective applicants? I know that was like a few part question, so if I have to repeat anything, just let me know.
I can start. I know I applied for both at the same time, but I had many colleagues who started with one program and then applied for the other. So like, but you know, you can definitely go either way. But yeah, at least for me, I knew that I wanted to pursue both, and I specifically applied to schools that had both programs. So that's how I landed. Yeah.
I did the same. I applied to both at the same time, and again, also had colleagues that did apply to in the first year or so. Marhawi and I think we're very lucky with our group, because our cohort of dual degrees, there were 5 of us, and we got very close and had lots of classes together and lots of time together. And we all started social work together at the same time. There were others that started policy and they were with the policy cohort, because kind of the way it works is you start your first year with your class, but then the second year, your social work class graduates. And so they leave, and then you join the policy class the second year. So you're graduating with the class that comes in your second year. And so we became a nice little unit and then joined the policy cohort. And graduated with the policy and social work cohort, but don't really know the social work cohort that we graduated with because they were not our original cohort, if that makes sense. Or Howie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, I same as you guys. I applied at the same time, but again, I also knew people who applied in their first year when they were thinking about the other program, or even people who did like the law school or education or other like Asian American studies, things like that. So you can do different dual programs if you're interested. But yeah, going to what Haley said, I think it was really good because there is that you get to have sort of two cohorts. You have a multiple in each program actually, right? But like when you come in with one group, you get to know them really well. You take all your first year classes together, and then they go off and do their second year classes, and you start your first year policy classes, or vice versa, whichever one you start first. So it's an interesting experience. I think we could go into that more later maybe, but like having a very tight knit group, that was great because then we all were able to rely on each other and just kind of, get each other through the program, because you're kind of like you're in both programs, but you're also kind of not sometimes, and so you have to figure it out as you go along as well.
I think that brings up a really important point. And so Haley and Howard, you can definitely add on to this, but Aisha, I wanted to ask, how do you manage your time? How do you manage the workload that is completing both programs essentially simultaneously?
Well, like it was mentioned before, you get to focus at least your core classes your first year. And so then you're managing just that, you're probably in your mind, you're thinking public policy, but really you're focusing on your core classes each year. And then same way for the second year. But I think for me that I started with social work, it's also considering your internship, right? That you're having your Monday, Wednesday. And so I think starting with that really helped me structure like the rest now of my years of like, at least working hours, because at least your internship hours are, your regular working days, 8 to 5-ish, right? And so at least for me, structuring all of my work around that, like thinking, all right, this is a job, so let me maintain myself within these hours. And so I think that was helpful, at least it was able to be manageable, definitely. Then come second year, since you do your internship, at least I did my internship during the summer. So then once you're in second year, by then you should be done with your internship hours, and then you're just focusing your public policy classes. And so same way, I think it was manageable for me, the core classes, and keeping within those hours. It's hard to stay disciplined, but I think it paid off in the end to really manage your time. And then if you're thinking about working part-time, like dedicating those hours becomes difficult. And of course, makes it all easier if you're joining your study groups, if you're joining reading groups, all of that, team effort, it just, it's going to make it so much more manageable, of course.
Haley, Mehrabi, do you have anything to add to that? Because I definitely have questions for you.
Yeah, I think that the core classes are the core classes. And so I don't necessarily think that the dual degree program is much harder to manage than the regular programs. It's just an additional year. And so what is harder to manage is making sure you have the right classes and that you're staying on track to graduate and you're getting in the right electives. But I don't think that I was taking more units per quarter than anyone else in the normal cohort. I think it was pretty standard. What is harder, as Aisha mentioned, is the first year of social work, you're doing full internship hours. That summer, you're doing your full social work clinical internship hours, and then you need to do a public policy internship as well. And so adding working as much as you can, if you need that financially on top of that, was challenging, but you can do it. It's very doable.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think it's the combination of everything. It's the internships, the classes, and any other work that you're doing on top of that. So, you know, whether you're working as a TA, if you're doing a research position, if you're working outside of school on some on-campus job, juggling everything. I felt like the hard part for me in the first 2 years was having to internship, working, doing the classes, and then summer being busy with like the internship, going straight through to the second year. It just felt like there was no break. And then, you know, we also had like, at the end of our first year, that's when COVID hit. And then there was the transition to online. And I'm sure if you guys have been in school the last couple of years, you've experienced that. So, you know, hopefully things are more normal these coming years. But I think it's just dealing with life sometimes while you're trying to juggle everything.
Or Howie, do you want to add that having additional life is difficult?
Oh, for sure. So yeah, like I am a parenting student as well, and like having like it's been a great experience, but it was a lot to juggle on top of everything. So I think like in our second year when we did the policy program first year classes, that was kind of a tough time as well, because it was sort of remote learning. And then there was no, it felt like there was no balance. Like we were in classes, we were doing tutoring, we were doing like student like Zoom meetings to try to figure out our homework and our classes. And it felt like there was no break, like we were just working all day long on the weekends. And so that was a tough part. And I think it has gotten easier. It was like third year and beyond, it was more of a balance. So like the third year felt a lot better for me. And for some students, it was the opposite, where they had to do a lot more in their third years, whatever it may be. But again, I think having the support of like a cohort was really crucial for sure.
Fantastic. And this question is for Aisha and Haley. What do you see yourselves doing now, having completed the degree and going into your third year, looking to complete the degree? Where do you see your career or your future trajectory going?
Yeah, I feel like it's gotten more solid, that idea, over the summer. I know, like I mentioned, part of the public policy internship hours, I've been working for a community land trust. So I've been delving into housing, and then also on the social work side, you know, facilitating that for residents, like for them to have an understanding of the real estate market and what we're trying to do as a community land trust, and to support their ownership, housing ownership one day. And so I definitely see my trajectory going that way. And I definitely see how my both degrees are definitely complementing that, like knowing the policy, but also knowing how to translate policy, and or at least break it down in a way that makes sense to an everyday person, right? And so I think that's where I've been definitely preparing myself this last year, and where I see, you know, definitely see post-grad, hopefully to continue with that. Yeah.
So I made sure that all of the fellowships and internships that I did were complementary after the first year, where you're assigned one, were complementary to what I was hoping to do in the future, because I was fairly certain about it, because I worked before and knew that this was the trajectory that I was headed for. And so all of them were surrounded international, global, working with refugees, working with immigrants, and doing a bilingual clinical focus. And so all of my fellowships and clinical work was in Spanish, because that's what I wanted to be focused on. And so the last few months, I was finishing a refugee resettlement project since graduation that I started before graduation. And I'm currently working with a mentor of mine from Luskin on a special project for that, and interviewing for next steps. And what I've noticed in these interviews, everybody is very, oh, you have an MSW and an MPP, those combination, that's really unique. Tell us about it. And so I've been able to talk about that combination in interviews, which was my hope, and it's been possible, which is great. And so it's kind of given me a level up when I've had offers also for financial, what's the word? My brain is a little off. Sorry, everybody. For financial
Like negotiations.
negotiation. Thank you, Christy. In negotiation, I've been able to use that. There's 2 degrees. It's not just policy. It's not just social work. I don't just have a clinical focus. It's also coming in with the policy background. That's been really, really helpful in negotiations and also in interviewing. Is that helpful? Okay, Marhawi.
Love it. We love leverage. Mayor Howie, I wanted to ask why, or I guess, what led you to the decision to becoming a PhD applicant? And did you feel you had any leverage or special consideration as a current master's student?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we were applying, I was kind of considering a few different things, and one of the things I looked at when I was checking out the Luskin website and talking to people was there's also a MSW PhD dual degree or whatever they call it. But that year they weren't offering it. And I wasn't even sure if I would get in if I applied, because I was like, I don't know if I have the experience or whatever. So since I was interested in policy, I applied for that. And I'd always been thinking about going into research, going into academia and getting my PhD, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to commit to that. So once we finished our master's program, or where we were getting close, I was like, I'm just going to apply and see what happens. And I don't know that if I wait a few years that I'm going to come back to this. I was like, I don't know that I, want to be in school that long. So I definitely think having and talking to professors and talking to different people, I think the policy focus, having the master's degree in the MPP program definitely was a plus. And like Haley knows, like I talked to different people once I decided to do PhD about funding opportunities and things like that. And I applied for a position on the Board of Regents. And I feel like that's one of the things that put me over the top, is having the dual focus and, working on sort of like educational institutional policy at the UC, as having a policy degree definitely helped. So I think it's already paying off. And yeah, we'll see. Right now, I'm just starting the first year and not sure what I'm in for yet, but we'll find out.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. I'm going to open it up to our participants now. Do you guys have any questions for any of our current or alumni students? Any curiosities, anything you would like to have expanded on? Please feel free to unmute yourself. I have a question in the chat. Are there any research focused on LGBTQIA community in the public policy areas? Oh, yes, let me see. Does it match any of the areas and concentrations mentioned before? So is there, I would say, an opportunity to focus your research on the LGBTQIA community?
Can I clarify first that there's 2 different focus areas. So for social work, you're choosing, Aisha and Marhawi, help me out though. You're choosing health and mental health, social and economic justice. That was Marhawi, health and mental health. I did social and economic justice. There's
Children and families or something, yeah.
Children and families. There's like more of a clinical practice focus. Aisha, what else is there? That's it, maybe. So those are the focuses within social work. And so you're choosing your classes and your track based on those. And then for public policy, you design your own focus. And so you choose your focus. And then for your capstone at the end, you're choosing your focus also. So if you want to focus on LGBTQ populations and research, you can focus on that for your capstone. You can pick classes that are associated with that. You can pick professors to work with that are associated with that. Ian Holloway is a great professor in social work who focuses on that. Aisha and Marhawi, you might have more. Yeah,
I definitely think Professor Holloway has a few different research projects and has a bunch of funding. So if you're interested in that, that's somebody that you could work with for your capstone or even on the policy side in terms of internship.
Yeah, that was the only person that came to mind. I'm sure there's others. I think he focuses specifically within the healthcare field. But yeah, in that sense, I would say they are pretty accessible, at least to reach out for even to get a sense of opportunities with them. I would say generally even helpful with classes, of course. Yeah, I would say they're generally approachable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of you guys, I think you can email a lot of professors and they're generally will get back to you fairly soon. The best thing I've learned is to be on campus, to hang around the Luskin building and catch them in the hallways in their offices. And they will make time to sit down and talk with you unless they have like an urgent meeting or something. And I've gotten the best information of just having those one-on-one interactions with them.
And I guess to add, like in the public policy, you'll do your capstone, right? And some professors are part of being the supportive faculty of these research ideas that y'all would come up to. And I think because of that also naturally, like professors are at least definitely in practice within the public policy school because of this research, the capstone. Yeah, that they're generally approachable even for your own research ideas, to troubleshoot with them, or even career-wise, you know, if you're thinking, like how I mentioned, like going in the academic world. I mean, they're in it, so yeah, they're generally approachable about that. Yeah.
And also with your social work program and with your social work internship, you're assigned a professor who supports that, and you can always go to them to check in and get advice and get support, in addition to your on-site clinical liaison person who's from the organization that you're working with. You have your professor to go to. So whenever I had issues or concerns with my placement and my internship, I would go to the professor and talk through issues and go with other professors from social work school and say, I have this client, I have this case, can you help me with it? And got incredible advice and support.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have another question. What did everyone study for undergrad? So did your background match your current MPP MSW pursuits? And why did you choose the Luskin School over the other programs you applied to?
To start, I studied public health in undergrad, so I think it very much helped my degree with social work. I mean, just the perspective and also getting into the statistics, I think definitely helped me studying public health. And then the second question. I mean, leverage was mentioned earlier. Definitely the financial support is a big deal. Definitely don't want to undervalue that. But I think also there was just so much more diversity in the professors and the faculty and the staff compared to the other programs I was considering. And so that was definitely a flag for me, and ultimately why I chose the program. Yeah.
So I was already here at UCLA for undergrad. I transferred. I was doing the African American Studies major and the psychology minor. So one, it was being here. I was like, I'm already here on campus. I knew the school. I had built some connections here, and I was like, knowing what I knew about the program, I preferred to stay at UCLA. I think I really just considered schools in Southern California because I don't want to uproot my family to go somewhere else. So the funding was good. USC, has a good program, but it's a lot more expensive. And I think it was also the opportunity to talking to people to know that I could do the different things that I was already interested in. So if I want to get training as a social worker, this is a program to do that. For me, having the African American Studies background, I knew I wanted to focus especially on issues of race and education and inequality, and having research opportunities in Luskin and outside of Luskin to do that. And then the policy aspect of it, fit in neatly with that. So I think that was the draw.
I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley, and I studied was it a long time ago? Yes. I studied peace and conflict studies and gender policy, and it relates in some ways and doesn't in some ways, but a lot of poli-sci classes, so there's some overlap. And I chose to go to UCLA because I had been living abroad for a long time and really wanted to come home to LA and be closer to my family. And I went to the USC and UCLA welcome days and had that in-person experience and met professors and talked to people about the program and just felt a good fit at UCLA. It felt comfortable, it felt home-y, and it felt like the people that I wanted to be surrounded by, learning from and working with for the next 3 years.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. We have 2 more minutes, so I can definitely field maybe one more question. But if there are no more questions, I can give y'all your 2 minutes back as well.
So
Okay.
I have a question. One of you mentioned that you were a public health undergraduate major. So what did you make you decide to do an MPP over an MPH?
I think it was, again, I was looking very specific for the dual degree policy and social welfare. At UCLA, you could also do social welfare and public health. But for me, I think the public health program at UC Berkeley was pretty strong. And so I definitely wanted to learn more on the policy technical end of things. They definitely touch on it on public health, but just the technical tools that I was looking forward to in the public policy school is what I was leaning to for me. Yeah.
So Mehari and Haley have shared their contacts in the chat for anyone that wants to get in touch. Maybe you're a bit shy and you have other questions or you think of questions afterwards. That's thank you very much for sharing your contacts. Aisha, Haley, Mehari, thank you so much for joining us today. Just having that student insight always makes such a huge difference. So we really appreciate y'all taking the time. If there are no other questions, happy Friday, the weekend awaits. If anyone has any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. I'm sure you all have my contacts at this point. But yes, thank you for joining. I hope this was helpful.
All right.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everyone.